An elderly man, visibly frail, stepped into a lively American cafe one morning, seeking nothing more than a simple sandwich. His humble request was greeted with impatience and disdain from the staff. A wealthy woman watched the scene unfold intently. Her gaze drifted to something on his wrist, and she suddenly froze, her eyes widening in astonishment. Feeling her heart race, she moved closer to him, and as she caught a clearer view, her expression grew solemn. The rich scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the cafe, mingling with the hum of quiet conversations from all corners of the bustling room. It was an ordinary morning, until an unusual hush fell over the crowd as the door opened, drawing all eyes to the elderly man stepping inside. His movement was slow, each step deliberate, as if burdened by unseen weight. Adrian, at 76, carried the signs of a long, challenging life. His frail, thin figure showed not only the wear of age, but the lasting marks of hardship and endurance. The worn, threadbare coat he wore barely shielded him from the crisp morning air, and his shoes, nearly threadbare, provided little comfort against the cold. With trembling hands, he navigated the cafe, ignoring the curious glances from the other patrons as he made his way inside. He passed by discreet whispers, which to him sounded like accusations, judgments he couldn't escape. His empty stomach ached, pushing him forward despite the humiliation gnawing at his pride. Adrian kept his eyes low, aware that his presence was anything but welcome. But he had no other choice. Reaching the counter, he laid a few coins down, his hands unsteady yet hopeful. The cafe's owner, Marcy, a middle-aged woman known for her sharp temper, looked him over with a withering expression. Her once clean apron was splattered with coffee stains, yet the disdain in her gaze toward Adrian seemed even more pronounced. His fingers, chapped and rough, fumbled with the coins as he tried to muster a shred of confidence. Marcy crossed her arms, her disapproval clear. "This isn't a homeless shelter, old man," she said, her tone sharp enough to make Adrian flinch. "If you don't have the money, you don't eat." Feeling the sting of humiliation, Adrian took a deep breath, attempting to keep his composure. "Please," he murmured, his voice cracking, "just anything you can give me. I'm hungry. Please." The plea was nearly a whisper, but the desperation in his eyes was unmistakable. The air around him felt heavy with tension, and some customers shifted uncomfortably, unwilling to intervene. None offered assistance. Marcy sneered, leaning closer to him. "Do you think you can come in here and ask for free food?" she snapped, her voice filled with contempt. "We don't have leftovers here. Go somewhere else." The whispers around him grew into faint laughter, adding yet another layer of pain to Adrian's already burdened heart. A nearby customer sneered, his lips curled in a smug grin. "That's right. Move on, old man. We don't want you here." Adrian froze, his eyes wet with the sting of humiliation. He wavered, unsure whether to turn and leave or try to plead a little longer. His stomach growled, and a wave of shame engulfed him. He felt utterly invisible, as though his whole life was being judged in that moment. The heavy silence hanging in the air only pressed down on him more, like a weight he couldn't shake. He wanted to vanish, but his feet felt rooted to the floor. Just then, when hope seemed lost, the cafe door swung open again. In walked a woman of grace and determination, Scarlett, her snow-white hair elegantly styled and dressed in a light, tasteful outfit, caught everyone's eye as she moved confidently into the room. She took in the scene before her with widened eyes, immediately sensing the tension. Without hesitation, Scarlett approached Adrian, and the atmosphere shifted at once. Marcy, who had just moments ago reveled in her arrogance, now seemed thrown off balance by the presence of this commanding woman. Scarlett wasn't just any customer. Known around town for her high-end boutiques, Her presence demanded respect. "What seems to be the problem here?" she asked, her voice firm, controlled, and laced with disapproval. She looked straight at Adrian, who remained motionless, holding on to what dignity he had left. Marcy tried to regain her composure, but Scarlett's unexpected intervention left the entire cafe hanging on her next words. The tension was thick, almost tangible. Scarlett turned to Adrian with a gentle, reassuring smile and extended her hand. "Don't worry, sir. Today your meal is on me." The elderly man looked at her in disbelief, his tear-filled eyes now shining with a hint of hope. Scarlett then faced Marcy, who, still startled by the disruption, struggled to hold on to her authority. The hostility that had initially been directed toward Adrian now focused squarely on Scarlett, whose quiet strength radiated through the room. "I've already said," Marcy insisted, defensively, trying to regain control of the situation. "We can't serve this type of person here. This isn't a place for charity." Scarlett's gaze remained calm, yet her eyes held a steely intensity that made Marcy pause. "This type of person," she repeated, leaning in slightly. "I believe we're talking about a human being, not a type, Marcy." The other patrons, who had previously found amusement in Adrian's shame, now watched the scene with a mix of discomfort and curiosity. The dynamic shifted entirely. Scarlett, her stance resolute, refused to back down. Adrian, who had kept his gaze on the floor, now looked up at the woman defending him. His trembling hands still clutched the few coins he'd managed to gather. He wasn't sure if he should speak, the words catching in his throat from years of suppressed dignity. "I'll cover whatever he needs," Scarlett declared with unwavering calm, her focus now fully on Adrian. "He has as much right to be here as anyone else." Her eyes swept over the room, challenging anyone to argue otherwise. Marcy, attempting to reclaim the upper hand, blurted, "We don't offer charity here. If he can't pay, he shouldn't be here." Without flinching, Scarlett countered, her voice steady but firm. "Kindness is not charity, Marcy. It's a reminder of what we owe each other as human beings." "That's our business," Marcy insisted. "Business?" interrupted Scarlett, her voice calm but her lips curling into an ironic smile. "Businesses are built on people, Marcy, and it seems you've forgotten that." Scarlett stepped forward, moving closer to the crowd, raising her voice so everyone could hear. "I've been a customer here for years, and never did I imagine I'd witness something so heartless." The hum of voices among the customers fell silent, and an uneasy stillness settled over the room. Marcy, aware that any confrontation could damage her reputation, stood rigid, her pride holding her in place. "This isn't a charity center," Marcy retorted, folding her arms as though the posture might bolster her stance. "If he doesn't have money, there's nothing I can do." Scarlett let out a brief, cool smile, though her eyes remained sharp. "You speak of charity, yet you're treating a man as if he's less than human." Adrian, stunned that anyone, let alone a refined woman like Scarlett, would stand up for him, fought to hold back tears. Seeing his gaze, Scarlett stepped a bit closer, her voice softening. "Sir, you can have whatever you'd like today," she said, slipping a few coins into his hand. "Hold on to this. Don't worry about it." Marcy, feeling the tension intensify with each passing second, attempted to end the exchange. "Fine, ma'am. If that's what you want, so be it. But this won't happen again," she muttered, her pride bruised. Scarlett, unbothered, simply offered a calm smile and replied, "What won't happen again, Marcy, is how you treat people here. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of business you're running." Marcy froze, aware that Scarlett's words carried weight. Nearby patrons, hesitant to step in, now appeared to reconsider what they had just witnessed. One of the workers, perhaps sensing the shift in atmosphere, finally led Adrian to a table, all while Scarlett watched closely. As she observed, she felt a mix of sadness and satisfaction well up inside her, a deep empathy for this man, an unexplainable connection. Once Adrian was seated, Scarlett joined him, pulling up a chair beside him. "Now, sir, what would you like to eat? You're hungry, so let's take care of that," she said warmly, her tone now softened and inviting. Adrian, still uncertain how to express his gratitude, murmured, "I don't know how to thank you, ma'am, for what you're doing." Scarlett shook her head, smiling. "You don't need to thank me, Adrian. Let's just enjoy a good meal together, and then we can talk." She watched as the reluctant waiter placed Adrian's plate a sandwich and a hot cup of coffee on the table with minimal enthusiasm, but under Scarlett's firm gaze, he held his tongue. Adrian looked at the plate before him with a mix of wonder and gratitude. His hands, still trembling slightly, reached out slowly for the sandwich, as if he half expected the moment to vanish like a dream. "Go ahead, it's yours," Scarlett encouraged with a warm smile that contrasted with her earlier resolve. "You deserve this." Adrian gave a grateful smile as he took his first bite of the sandwich. The hunger seemed to wash away all the embarrassment and discomfort he'd felt only moments ago. He chewed slowly, almost reverently, while Scarlett watched in silence, trying to process an unfamiliar feeling stirring within her, a blend of compassion and something deeper, a connection to this man that defied explanation. As Adrian ate, the coffee shop returned to an uneasy semblance of normalcy. Marcy, still fuming over Scarlett's kindness toward a stranger, had left the booth with a string of harsh words and sidelong glances in their direction. Yet, a lingering tension clung to the air, as though something unresolved was still waiting to surface. Just then, as Scarlett adjusted her purse on the table, she caught a glint of something on Adrian's wrist. At first, she didn't pay it much mind, but something about the watch drew her attention. The shape and style struck a familiar chord, and she blinked, as if trying to dispel a distant memory that had begun to resurface. "Mr. Adrian," she said, her voice laced with a curious edge. "May I see your watch?" Adrian, a little puzzled, paused mid-bite, glancing at his wrist as if he had forgotten the watch was even there. "Oh, of course," he replied, carefully unclasping it and handing it to Scarlett. "It's a gift from someone very special." Scarlett took the watch, her fingers trembling slightly. The cool metal's touch sent her back to memories she had long since buried. She turned it over, examining the backplate, and suddenly her heart leapt. Engraved there, in delicate lettering, was a name that brought tears to her eyes: Evans. Shocked, she raised her hand to her mouth. This watch. It was the very one she had once gifted to the person who had meant everything to her. The watch had belonged to Evans, the man she had loved and lost tragically. How could this piece have ended up with Adrian? "Where did you get this watch?" Scarlett's voice trembled as she asked, her gaze locked onto it as though it had reopened a wound she'd thought was healed. Adrian, noticing the emotion in Scarlett's eyes, seemed confused for a moment. "It was a gift," he replied somewhat nervously, "a gift from my son, Evans." His words struck Scarlett like a blow. Her suspicions were confirmed. Adrian's son was indeed Evans, her great love, the man whose loss she still grieved. Her heart raced as a whirlwind of sorrow, surprise, and regret filled her chest. Adrian, unaware of the full depth of her reaction, continued, "Evans, he passed many years ago. After he was gone, life was never the same." Scarlett felt tears welling up, but she fought to maintain her composure. The shock of this revelation was overwhelming. Evans had vanished from her life so abruptly, and she had never had the chance to say a proper goodbye. Now, here was his father, a man shattered by life's hardships, holding the only piece of him that still connected her to the past. He was my... Scarlett struggled to find the words, emotions flooding over her. Adrian, noting her state, began to comprehend the gravity of the moment, a mixture of shock and sorrow dawning in his eyes. I loved him," Scarlett confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "I loved him more than anything in this world." The silence that followed was heavy, saturated with emotions neither of them had anticipated. Adrian looked at her, stunned, trying to process the revelation. Scarlett's gaze stayed on the watch, as if she feared that this tiny piece of memory might slip away from her again. "Why didn't he ever mention you?" Adrian finally asked, his voice a mixture of curiosity and a barely concealed ache. Scarlett took a deep breath, steeling herself to unearth the wounds of her past. "It's a long story," she began, looking into the eyes of the man who suddenly felt like more than just a stranger. "But I think we need to talk." Scarlett held Evans's watch carefully, as though it were made of fragile glass, ready to shatter at the slightest mishandling. Each detail of the piece transported her back to a time she thought she had left behind. The open face, the subtle engraving on the underside, and the way Evans used to wear it on his wrist while they talked. Everything came rushing back in a flood of emotions, immersing her in memories of those cherished days she would never forget. Adrian watched her, his own eyes misted over in a confusion that was slowly giving way to understanding. He recognized that look, the look of someone who had loved his son deeply, someone who shared the pain he had borne alone since losing Evans. Their connection was undeniable. "He never mentioned you," Adrian said slowly, his voice low and hesitant. It was as though he wasn't ready to hear what Scarlett was about to share, yet something inside him needed to know. Scarlett's tears streamed as she clutched the letter tightly between her fingers. "I don't even know where to begin," she replied, her tone heavy with sorrow, her heart weighted with memories. "I met Evans when we were young. I had just started my first job in the city. He used to visit with donations for the orphanage where I'd grown up, and that's how we got to know each other." Adrian's eyes widened in surprise. "Orphanage?" he echoed slowly. "Yes," Scarlett murmured, a hint of nostalgia in her gaze. "I was raised there. I never knew my parents, but the orphanage became my family. It was there that I met Evans. He was always so kind, devoted, so full of life. We had so many dreams together, plans for the future, until death took it all away." Adrian fell silent, absorbing her every word. Scarlett's pain mirrored his own, yet hearing her story made him realize there was a side of Evans's life he had never glimpsed, a side of the son he lost too soon to truly understand. His heart ached, but there was also a strange gratitude for meeting someone who shared that love. "I never knew that part of his life," he murmured, lowering his head. "After Evans died, my wife, Eleanor, she always blamed someone. She claimed he grew distant because of some woman, but she never shared the details. All I knew was that everything changed after he was gone." Scarlett flinched at the mention of Eleanor, Evans's mother. She didn't need clarification to know whom Adrian was referring to. Faint memories of stiff, strained encounters with that woman flooded back someone with impossible expectations and approval that was never granted. Elena never accepted me, Scarlett admitted, her voice trembling. She never thought I was good enough for her son, and that drove a wedge between Evans and his family. He was torn between trying to be the perfect son and wanting to live his own life. It was a very difficult time. Adrian shifted, visibly moved. He hadn't realized how deeply his son had suffered, nor had he fully understood the conflict that drove Evans away from his family. Elena had convinced him the fault lay with the girl his son loved. But now, sitting beside Scarlett, he saw the pain ran far deeper and was more complex than he had imagined. He never stopped visiting us, but it was rare, Adrian said with a heavy sigh. And then, when the accident happened, Scarlett's throat tightened as she recalled that fateful day. The memory approached like a storm she could never fully escape, the moment that shattered everything. Adrian continued, his voice more fragile, wavering with emotion. That day, it all happened so fast. Evans was with you, and I never knew exactly what happened. He was gone in an instant, and all that was left was this photograph, he said, his gaze fixed on the small frame in Scarlett's hands, as if it was the last tangible connection to his son. Scarlett closed her eyes, holding back tears. She had been there that day, the day of the accident that changed everything. The memory was a raw wound that had never healed. I was with him, she finally confessed, breaking the silence. We were heading to a friend's house together, but we never made it. The car, there was an accident. Everything happened so fast. When I woke up, he was already gone. The tears she had held back for so long finally spilled over, and she covered her face with her hands, letting herself merge with the weight of the moment. Adrian watched her, equally moved, his own silent tears softening the lines of his trembling face. "I never knew," Adrian cried out, his voice fractured with sorrow and regret. "I never knew you were with him." Scarlett crouched down, trying to steady her emotions. "I loved him with all my heart," she murmured, "and that day I lost everything." She'd tried to move forward, but the past always resurfaced, while Adrian had sunk deeper into sorrow and regret, leaving him a weary old man, struggling to survive the remnants of his losses. "I can hardly believe it," Adrian whispered, shaking his head slowly. "You were the woman he loved, and I never realized what that meant to him." Scarlett quickly wiped away her tears, fighting to maintain her composure. "I didn't know he was your son until now, but seeing that picture brought it all back. Every memory," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "He always carried the gift you gave him when we started making plans for our future." She looked at Adrian, who seemed lost in his own thoughts, his gaze fixed on the past. "He didn't talk about you much," she added. Adrian's voice rose almost to a shout. "But I could tell something was taking him away from us. Elena, my wife, she never accepted the idea of Evans being with someone she thought was beneath us. She wanted him to marry someone from society, someone who could lift our status." His voice trembled with a pain he could no longer hide. Scarlett understood perfectly. "She hated me," she replied quietly. "When I tried to reach out, I felt her disdain. And Evans, caught between it all, tried to make everyone happy, but it broke him." Adrian took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped the edge of the table. "I never imagined it would turn out this way," he murmured. "After he was gone, Eleanor and I drifted even further apart. She blamed me, and deep down, I think I blamed myself too. That's when everything started to crumble." Scarlett looked at Adrian with profound empathy. "And how did you stay here?" she asked gently, each word carefully chosen to avoid reopening wounds. Adrian let out a heavy sigh, the weight of his story pressing his shoulders even further down. After Evans died, Elena was never the same. She sank into sorrow, and I lost my passion too. Our once happy home couldn't bear it. That wretched divide tore us apart, and I ended up withdrawing from it all. We lived comfortably, but the emptiness left by his absence was unbearable. Elena always blamed me, Adrian said, his voice barely above a whisper. She would say that if I had been more firm with Evans, he would have chosen a different path, stayed away from you. And in my weakness, I believed it for a long time. Listening to this, Scarlett felt a heavy weight in her chest. It wasn't easy to hear that Elena saw her as the reason for the family's downfall. Adrian, she said slowly, it wasn't your fault, and it wasn't anyone's fault. Sometimes life takes us down paths we can't predict or control. What happened was an accident, but the love Evans had for you and for me, that love was real. None of this can be diminished by blame. Leave a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Adrian looked at Scarlett, his eyes brimming with tears, clearly moved by her words. I never thought I'd find you one day or learn who the woman my son truly loved was. This means a great deal to me. The emotions that filled his gaze seemed to span time itself. Evans's token was still in Scarlett's hands, and she held it out to Adrian, who took it back with a solemn expression. This token, Scarlett said softly, is more than an accessory. It's a symbol of the time we spent with him, of everything we shared. And as painful as it is, it also reminds me that time moves on, and we need to find ways to move forward. Adrian offered a sad smile, feeling the weight of those words. I don't know how to move forward, he admitted, his voice honest. After losing everything, Eleanor and I ended up on the streets, and now, we're just surviving. Scarlett felt a strong wave of empathy, enough to shift in her seat. And where is Elena now? She asked, her heart opening wide. Adrian lowered his head. She's waiting for me at a nearby park. We don't have anywhere to go, and, she's in even worse shape than I am. Scarlett took a deep breath, sensing a deeper purpose taking hold. I want to see Elena, she said firmly. I want to help you both. I can't change the past, but maybe I can do something for the future. As they walked through the city streets, Scarlett's heart drew closer to Adrian, the father of the man she had loved. The words they'd exchanged at the cafe lingered in her mind. She knew that meeting the woman who had once despised her would be difficult. Yet, something inside told her this was the right path. Adrian led the way quietly, his steps slow and apprehensive, as if the weight of years and hardship had drained all his energy. Scarlett's gaze moved across the city, but her mind was flooded with thoughts. Meeting Eleanor was something she'd never imagined, and memories of Evans's mother sent a shiver through her. Yet she knew she needed to face her. Finally, after a few minutes, they arrived at a small park tucked away between old buildings. It was a quiet place, open yet peaceful, where a few people sat on benches or walked cheerfully. And there, in the shade of a large oak tree, sat Eleanor. The contrast between the proud woman Scarlett once knew and the frail figure before her was startling. Eleanor, once immaculate and composed, now sat slumped, wrapped in an old, tattered dress, her grey hair left unkempt. Her once proud eyes were now vacant, staring into nothing as she clutched a small box beside her. Adrian approached her cautiously, as if fearful of disturbing a fragile peace. Scarlett followed closely, her heart pounding. As they neared, Elena looked up with a weary expression that shifted quickly to surprise and mistrust at the sight of a stranger with her husband. "Adrian," she murmured, her voice strained and faint. "Who is this woman?" Searching for the right words, Adrian replied, "Eleanor, this is Scarlett. She was someone important to Evans." The mention of Evans' name dropped like a stone into a still pond, sending ripples of tension and buried emotions through them. Elena's eyes widened at the name, immediately recognizing who stood before her. "Scarlett," Elena said, her voice carrying a blend of distrust and resentment. "You're the woman who took him from us, the reason for all our suffering." Her accusation was sharp and direct, and Scarlett felt the sting of those words like needles. But she took a deep breath, determined to stay composed. She knew that any chance of reconciliation would require patience. "Elena, I understand that's how you see me," Scarlett said, her voice calm but steady. "But I'm here to help. We can't change the past, but maybe we can find a way forward." Elena hunched over, her hands wringing as she clutched her coat tighter. "You don't understand. I lost everything. Everything. My son, our life. Nothing else makes sense." Scarlett felt a pang in her chest, seeing the pain in Elena's eyes. There was no denying that this woman was utterly shattered by the loss of Evans. Adrian sat down beside her, gently holding her hands. "My love, I know you've suffered, I have too. But we met Scarlett by chance today, and she's willing to help us. Maybe it's time to stop running from the past." Elena looked from Adrian to Scarlett, her expression a mix of confusion and sorrow. "Why now?" Elena questioned, her eyes wide with a spark of distrust, as if searching for some hidden agenda in Scarlett's word. "Why? After all we've been through, you suddenly show up to help us? You don't owe us anything?" Scarlett moved forward, looking at Adrian before stepping closer to meet Eleanor's gaze. Her eyes held a softness, yet there was a weight of emotion in her voice. "I loved Evans, and I know we've both lost so much, but I'm here because he would have wanted this. He taught me forgiveness, showed me the importance of caring for others, and I believe, wherever he is, he'd want me to reach out to you." Eleanor stood silent for a long moment, the gentle breeze rustling through the trees, the only sound that filled the quiet tension between them. Scarlett could see the struggle in Eleanor's eyes, a battle between wounded pride and the deep-seated need to finally let go of the past. At last, Eleanor sighed, a long and tired breath, as if releasing years of pent-up resentment. "I don't even know what to say." Adrian gently squeezed her hand. "Just say you'll accept the help, Elena. We've lived this way for too long. Maybe it's time for a change." Tears brimmed in Elena's eyes, and for the first time, her rigid posture softened just a little. I don't know if I can trust again." "I'm not asking you to trust me right away," Scarlett replied, her smile warm and encouraging. "But let me try to help. Let's take this one step at a time. I have space in my home. You're welcome to stay until we find a better solution." Eleanor glanced over at Adrian, who looked at her with hope and gentleness. Then she finally let out a sob, allowing her tears to fall. "I accept," Scarlett smiled, and in that moment, something began to shift. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, and it would be a long journey, but for the first time in years, Scarlett felt a glimmer of healing in sight. The first rays of morning light filtered into Scarlett's cozy, modern living room. Adrian and Eleanor had stayed overnight, still feeling unsettled and wary of the drastic change in their lives. Scarlett's home was both warm and elegant, its decor reflecting her comfortable lifestyle, a stark contrast to the harsh reality Adrian and Eleanor had known. Scarlett sat in an armchair near a large window, sipping a steaming cup of coffee while she watched the sunrise. Her mind was full of thoughts. Having Adrian and Elena in her home was far more than just an act of kindness. It was a step toward healing old wounds, toward forgiveness, and perhaps a path to peace. Eleanor appeared at the doorway, hesitating as though still adjusting to the idea of being under Scarlett's roof. There was something disarming about seeing the once proud woman now so vulnerable, her shoulders hunched under the weight of years and tears. Her eyes were weary, yet in them there was a faint glimmer of something new, perhaps a fragile hope. "You're up early," Scarlett said with a gentle smile, motioning to the seat beside her. "Would you like some coffee?" Elena hesitated, as though still contemplating whether to accept this offering of friendship, but finally she eased into the chair beside Scarlett. "Yes, I'd like some, thank you." Scarlett poured a cup and handed it to Eleanor, who held it with both hands, letting its warmth seep into her cold fingers. The silence between them was thick, but not hostile. "I still can't believe I'm here," Eleanor murmured, almost to herself, looking down into her coffee. "If someone had told me years ago that I would one day accept help from you, I would have laughed in their face." Scarlett nodded, understanding. "I get it. To be honest, I never thought we'd end up here either, especially after everything that happened." Elena took a deep breath, as if preparing for a difficult confession. "I never took kindly to you, Scarlett. When Evans first spoke of you, I knew right away you weren't what I'd imagined for him. I always wanted the best for my son, and in my mind, that meant someone who would help him rise in life." Scarlett remained silent, letting Elena speak at her own pace. "But now I see how wrong I was," Elena continued, her voice trembling. "I lost my son, lost everything, and for so long I blamed you. I blamed you for taking Evans away from us, for being the reason behind all our suffering. But the truth is, what happened was bigger than any one of us." Scarlett felt a knot tighten in her throat. Eleanor's confession was something Scarlett never imagined hearing. "I never wanted to keep him away from you," she said softly. "I loved Evans, but I know you both loved him too. It wasn't easy for him to step away. He always wanted to hold everyone together." Eleanor began to sob, her face contorted by years of pain and pride. "For years I fueled my resentment, and it tore us apart. It didn't just hurt me, it hurt Adrian too. When Evans left, I lost my grounding, and now, so many years later, I see that blaming you was wrong. None of us came out of this without scars." Eleanor quickly wiped her tears, trying to retain a hint of dignity. "I don't know how to thank you for helping us now, after everything we've been through." Scarlett looked at her with compassion. "I'm not looking for thanks, Eleanor. I just want us all to find some peace. The anger and bitterness have consumed us for far too long. I think it's time to let go. If not for us, then for Evans." Eleanor managed a small, tentative smile. "He would be glad to see this, wouldn't he?" Scarlett nodded, her eyes somber. "Yes, he would." At that moment, Adrian entered the room, breaking the delicate silence with a lighter energy. He looked more relaxed, as if just having a roof over his head and a warm bed had renewed him. "You two having a chat?" he asked, a small smile on his face. "I think that's a good sign." Eleanor and Scarlett exchanged a glance and chuckled softly. "Yes, Adrian, we're talking," Scarlett replied, drawing him in. "I think we're finally putting the past in its place." Adrian sighed with relief and sat down next to Eleanor, gently taking her hand. "I always knew this wasn't how we were meant to live. Losing everything, the pain just grew and grew. But maybe now we have a second chance." Scarlett looked at them with a renewed sense of hope. "You have a place here as long as you need it, but I hope in time we can find something more permanent for you. You both deserve a fresh start." Eleanor squeezed Adrian's hand, a shy smile crossing her face. "Thank you, Scarlett. Maybe this is our chance to finally let Evans rest in peace." The days passed quickly after that morning of reconciliation, and Adrian and Elena began adjusting to their new life in Scarlett's home. The atmosphere, once thick with grief and buried hurt, was now filled with a sense of peace they had almost forgotten. Scarlett devoted herself to helping them, offering not just a home, but a new perspective on life. It was not an overnight change, but gradually the warmth of human kindness and empathy started to heal their deepest wounds. One afternoon, as Scarlett was organizing her bookshelf, Adrian came in and sat down beside her. His gaze was different, marked by a quiet determination. "Scarlett," he began, "I've been thinking a lot. I don't want you to feel as though we're taking advantage of your generosity. I know we've been staying here for some time, and I'm endlessly grateful, but I believe it's time for us to find something more permanent." Scarlett looked at him with surprise and admiration. "Adrian, you're not taking advantage of anything. I'm doing this because I want to help, and in a way, it helps me move forward too. But I understand what you're saying. You want something of your own, don't you?" Adrian smiled slowly, nodding. "Exactly. I think it's time for us to try building something for ourselves again. Maybe something simple, but something we can call home." Scarlett smiled, touched by Adrian's honesty and his desire to rebuild his life. "That's wonderful. And you don't have to do it alone. I want to keep helping, just in a different way now. We can find a place together, somewhere comfortable where you can start anew, with dignity." Visibly moved, Adrian replied, "I don't know how I'll ever thank you enough for this. After so long on the streets, I thought the chance for a normal life was beyond reach." "You deserve this new chance," Scarlett said tenderly, "and so does Elena. I'm thrilled you're ready to take this step." As they spoke, Elena entered the room, curious about the conversation. "Are you talking about leaving here?" she asked, looking from Adrian to Scarlett. "Yes," Scarlett answered with a gentle smile. "Adrian mentioned that you're ready to find a place of your own. I think it's a great idea. Do you feel ready for that?" Eleanor took a deep breath, visibly overwhelmed yet uplifted. I'm not sure," she admitted. "Here, I feel safe. After all we've been through, the idea of leaving again makes me nervous." Scarlett stepped closer and gently took Eleanor's hands. "I understand, and no one says it has to happen right away. We'll take it at your pace. What's important is that you know you'll always have a home, wherever it may be, and I'll be here to help." Eleanor looked at Adrian, who returned her gaze with an encouraging smile, as if saying they could finally move forward. She took a steady breath and then slowly nodded. Maybe it's time to try, but I want to do it knowing we're not alone." "You'll never be alone," Scarlett assured her. "This journey is one we'll take together." In the following days, Scarlett threw herself into helping them find a new home. They went through real estate listings, visited neighborhoods, and after a few weeks they found a small house, modest but welcoming. It was in a peaceful neighborhood near a park where Adrian and Elena could walk and perhaps start a routine in their new life. On the day they moved in, Scarlett helped them settle in, ensuring everything was in order. That first night in their new home was an emotional one for everyone. Adrian and Eleanor, though still nervous, were thrilled to have a place to call their own. As Scarlett said goodbye in front of their new home, Adrian hugged her warmly. "You've given us something we can never repay, Scarlett. The chance to be a family again." Scarlett smiled, touched. "You don't need to repay me. Just live this new life with all the love and gratitude in your hearts. That's more than enough." Eleanor, who had once struggled to show her emotions, stepped forward and hugged Scarlett as well. "I never thought I could forgive or move on, but now I see that forgiveness sets us free, and I'm grateful you gave us this chance." "We're all healing together," Scarlett said, looking at them with an affectionate smile. "And Evans would be happy to see this." As Scarlett walked away, leaving Adrian and Elena in the doorway of their new home, she felt a lightness in her heart. The past had been painful, but finally they were all finding their path to peace. In the weeks that followed, Adrian and Elena gradually adjusted to life in their new home. The simplicity of their days brought a tranquility they hadn't felt in years. Strolls in the park, conversations over dinner, and the quiet moments they shared were soothing to their souls. Scarlett visited often, always attentive to make sure they lacked nothing. The visits, once brief and formal, grew into long, relaxed visits. They laughed together, shared stories, and spoke about the future. After lunch, Scarlett suggested they all head out to the garden for coffee. With the sun setting in the background, the atmosphere was one of pure tranquility. Scarlett looked around, and for a moment, everything felt exactly as it should. "I never thought I'd feel this again," Elena murmured, breaking the comfortable silence. "This sense of family, of belonging." In the end, they became a new family, reborn through forgiveness and unity. Together they built a home filled with love and hope, ready to face the future with strength, knowing that while the past held pain, it no longer defined them. Love and forgiveness had transformed them, and a new chapter awaited. Thank you so much for staying until the end of this heartfelt story. It's amazing how love, forgiveness, and connection can help us find peace and rebuild even after life's hardest moments. Each of these characters, though marked by their past, found the strength to come together and create something beautiful, a new family filled with hope, resilience, and the promise of brighter days ahead. If this story moved you as much as it did me, don't forget to hit that like button and share it with someone who might need a little inspiration today. And if you want to stay connected for more stories like this, be sure to subscribe and tap the notification bell so you won't miss the next video. Remember, we all have the power to write our own story, no matter where we've been. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.